Welcome back, folks. So we're going to go ahead and continue it small again. So we're going to be setting up a read-only domain control and see what is an RODC. All right. So watch this. I have a second server up and running. Let me just go ahead and log on. Remember, this was actually a replica, an actual replica, which is writable. That means I could make changes to it. Let me see if I could log in. Is this Udemy? Right? Let's see. So this, I'm going to send it back to a work group. Right? Remember, this became a member server. So I'm just going to send it back to a work group. But it's pointing to the old domain. I was able to log in because it's actually cached. If I reset it, I won't be able to log on. Let me just remove from the domain. So it's actually a standalone server. So I'm trying to make my second server as a read-only domain control. Now, what is an RODC? From the name of it, it applies. It's just a read copy. That means I cannot make changes to it. I normally will have an RODC for a remote site, another location that has a limited number of users, and I don't have a network admin, on staff there. So it's not worth for the company to hire a network admin for, let's say, 5 users. So Microsoft came up with something called a read-only domain controller, which means it's going to be a read copy. I'm allowing specific users to log in with their cached credentials. So that's basically what an RODC is. So that's what I want to be setting up right now. It's not something typical that you'll see, but it's out there. It's good to know everything about Active Directory, I would say so. So let me just show you. Let me go ahead and log on to the system and set this up. And let me put the password and log in here. Give it a moment. Here's my server manager. So I'm going to set up let me just check my DNS configuration first. All right. Let me see. I need to be pointing to server 1. So this is actually server 2. This is normal. Let me just go ahead and check my network settings here. So my DNS should be 128. I just want to verify that. IP version 4, 128. So this actually looks good. Let me go to manage, add roles and features, next, 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 and I'm installing Active Directory domain services all the way through. There we go. And then I'll promote it to become a domain controller, but I'm going to specify that it's an actually read copy that I cannot make changes to it. And that's what I'm going to be looking into. As I said, it's not something as a big percentage that you'll ever be facing in the field. It's for a remote site that I have limited number of users, and I'm going to allow those specific users to log on with their cached credentials, right? That's what it does. And I cannot make changes to a read-only domain controller, which means it's not going to be a global catalog server. It's just a domain controller and it's a read copy, by the way. So that's one thing to know. Let's give it a moment and see how this actually works. Actually, RODC was introduced in Windows Server 2008. I started Active Directory from Windows 2000, and I saw Active Directory in Windows Server 2003, then Windows Server 2008, then Windows Server 2012, 16, 19, and later on 2022. Right? So it has a big history, of course. Every time they come up with a new version, it's like, okay, there's new features. We have something new. We have something better that you can actually work and support your organization and your environment. That's a beauty about Microsoft. I would say so. So let's give this a moment. This should be actually finishing up. All right. Should be done in a few seconds. Then I'll show you how it should be done to set up a read copy. All right. It's good for security, of course, that I don't have a network admin on staff. If somebody steals the domain controller, they can't really do much to it because it's a read copy. Let me promote this to a domain controller. And I have to choose a top option, add a domain controller to an existing domain. And over here, I'm going to be putting udemy.local, right? And change. So I have to have domain admin, right? So I'm going to put Udemy/administrator and the password. Then I'm going to continue. Looks like could not be contacted. Okay, something is going on over here. Let me see. Something is going on. This is actually good for troubleshooting. Let me take a look and see my DNS, guys. See, that's a problem when you don't configure DNS right. Do you see what's happening? Is DNS correct? 128? Yes, it is. Let me go back to server one. This is actually good. Good for troubleshooting. See, you will have trouble like this when you start putting all the DCs in there. Let me just make sure I have the right number. So this should be 128. Okay, let me just check my network settings over here also. I should be pointing to myself. It could be the loopback. Okay, that's fine. This is okay. Um, Firewall's off. Let me open DNS. And you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna delete this. I'm gonna fix. Watch this. So I'm gonna right click, new zone, next. Leave it as is the way I normally do it. And I'm gonna put udemy.local, next, next, and allow it for dynamic updates to generate the records. And I should see all the records. I like to do the following. Reopen services and restart Active Directory domain services just to give it a refresh. And yes, right? Let's give it a moment and see how this actually works for us. So DNS should be fine now. Let's see if this actually fixes the problem. If it doesn't, I want to test it with ping, fully qualified domain name, ping it by an IP address. I want to see what's actually going on over here. Why is it actually failing, right? Folks, so that's all about troubleshooting. As long as we don't actually give up, right? We need to get it actually working. So let's see right now. This should be coming up soon. Okay, so let me just check, refresh over here. This is actually good. Okay, all right, watch this. I'm going to go back to server 2, and I'm going to go next again. Look, it worked. Didn't I tell you that's not the right way to set up DNS? So I'm going to say global catalog, and I'm going to do DNS later. So we can see DNS one more time. And I'm going to be creating another site later. So I'm going to leave it as a read only, right? Let me put a password here. Let's put the password and continue. And look, it tells me accounts are allowed to replicate their passwords to the RODC. See this? There's a group I'll show you, and these ones are actually denied. I could add over here also a list, but whoever's a member of this group can actually do so. Where is this group? Well, let me show you. If I go back to server one and I check Active Directory users and computers, I go to the users container, and right over here, allowed RODC password replication group. See that? Members of this group. So as you see, there's nobody there by default. Members of this group can replicate to the read-only domain controller. See that? That's an actual group. We'll see more about groups, by the way. So for now, let me go back to my second server and just take the defaults and replicate from any. I only have one, so it doesn't matter. I'm not using IFM, which is installed from media, like as a snapshot or a backup. Everything stays the same. And next, and let's give it a moment. And let's go ahead and click install. Let me just make sure it runs. I'll be pausing the video and we'll come back to it again. So we'll see you folks in a moment. All right. All right. So we're back. And guess what? It didn't actually take long. It only took like a few minutes. Let me just go ahead and log on over here. Looks like the password. Let me just put this again. There we go. All right, let's give it a few seconds so you can see. Okay. Now, if I go back to server one, let me just show you. And I go to the domain controllers and I refresh, I should see the RODC. See that? Read only domain controller, right? So this is actually good. Let me just go back and make sure I could actually open AD over here. Remember, I did not put DNS yet, but I do see Active Directory domain services on the left-hand side over here. So this is actually normal. Then tools, and I'm going to open Active Directory users and computers. But look what it shows me right now. I just want to show you. It's actually connected to server one. So look, I can actually make change because I'm connected to server one. But if I right click and say change domain controller and connect to server two, which is the RODC, then click OK, look what it says. So the selected one is read only. I'm not going to be able to make any write operations. This is perfect. So I'm going to click on OK. And right now, everything is grayed out. So I cannot make changes. That's what I wanted to show you. We still have more to cover about the RODC in a future lecture. So we'll see you guys in a moment. All right, guys, later then. Bye. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So we're going to continue with section 10, but this time I'm going to be setting up DNS on the read-only domain controller. Why? Remember, both of these are in different locations, different sites. So my writable domain control, let's say it's in New York, and my read-only domain control, let's say it's in actually Connecticut. So I have to have a DNS on each side. It won't make sense to go through a WAN link to resolve names. But guess what? When I set up DNS on my read-only domain controller, the DNS server is also going to be a read copy. So let's take a look and see. So let me go to my second server and log on. And I'm going to go to manage, add roles and features. Next, 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 and put a check mark in DNS and install. Of course, the zone will not get populated here unless I go to server one and store the zones in Active Directory. Then it's going to sync to the read-only domain controller. That's what's going to actually happen. So let's give this a moment to finish up. So this is going to be in a different site. So it should have its own DNS server, right? So it should have its own DNS server. It will be a read copy. I won't be able to make changes to it. So my clients in that remote site will be pointing to this DNS server. Let me just wait until this actually finishes. Then I'm going to go ahead and open DNS and show you that there's actually nothing there yet. All right. That's what I want to actually see. Nothing is actually hosted on that server. And it should be finishing up soon enough. All right. Okay, it's almost actually there. It won't actually take long, especially with DNS. It's a simple role, as you see. So when it does that, it's doing something in the background. This is good. All right. So if I go to tools and DNS, remember I'm on server two, which is the read copy, and I check, I don't see the actual zone. So I have to go back to server one, store the zone in Active Directory so it could actually sync to the read-only domain controller. So watch this. Let me just go ahead to DNS and right click properties and change. So it's actually in the same database. All right. And I would like to change it to secure only. We're going to see more about this. Then, okay. So if I restart Active Directory domain services here, just for an actual refresh, and I'm going to do the same thing on server two, which is a read only, just to speed up the actual process. Eventually, it will do it on its own. So let me go to services and restart Active Directory domain services. So I want to make sure I have DNS here on the side. And then I'll show you what needs to be actually done. Give it a few seconds, and then I'm going to refresh the zone, and I should actually have the zone in the list. So if I refresh over here, nope, not yet. Let me restart the service again. It may take some time. I may have to restart the actual computer itself. Let me just go ahead and check my server one. See, sometimes these do take a while. Let me just restart the service again over here on the server. And back to server two and do the same thing. Restart the service. I may have to force replication if it doesn't actually work. No, it's not there. So what I like to do is I like to go back to server one. I could do it from sites and services, but this is actually good for troubleshooting. Let me just open the command prompt and see how this actually works. Remember the rep admin sync all. So watch this. So rep admin slash sync all. Sync all finished, terminated with no errors. All right, so this is good. Let me check server two again. Nope, it doesn't want to do it. Let me restart the service. Sometimes things do take a while. That's things about IT. Let me just check server one. and see that my DNS is actually fine. Properties, right? That's what I'm gonna look into. And DNS is good. Let me change it to this option for now instead of secure. Then I could switch it. Looks like this is delaying it a little bit. All tasks, restart. I want to do it again. All right. And refresh the zone. Then minimize this. Go back to server 2. Let me refresh. Nope. Let me restart the service. If not, I'm going to restart the actual server. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to restart server 1 and server 2 over here, guys. So watch this. Let me go back to server 1, restart the server on server 1, right? And I'm going to do the same thing on server 2. This is good for, I would say, troubleshooting and restart on server 2. Right? And let's see after this. So what I'm going to do is I'll just pause the video for now. And once they're actually up, I'm going to go ahead and log on. So we'll see you guys soon. Okay, folks? Okay, folks, it's actually back. So let's take a look and see over here. Let me go ahead and log on to server 1 and see what's actually happening. And then I'm going to do the same thing on my second server. There we go. And let me take a look. If it doesn't do it, I'll do it manually. I'll show you how. Because it's just a read copy zone. So I could actually configure that. So if I go to tools, then DNS, let's see. Okay, the zone is not actually there. So what I could do is this. It's actually a read copy, which means it's a secondary zone. And the zone name is Udemy.local. Let me go next. And the primary server is 223.128. And yes, this is a good sign, actually. Server 1 and finish. But I won't be able to load it. I would have to go back to server 1. Watch this. Open DNS and make sure I have permission to do so. Let me go to the property zone transfer. I'm going to say only to the following, and I'm going to add the IP address of that server, right? Which is 192.16. Sorry, the numlock is not on. Don't you guys hate that? 192.168.223.129. That's server 2. The server with this IP address, right? What does it say? Let's see. Is not authorized for the required zone. So it looks like something is going on here. Let me see. Let me see. Let me click OK, apply anyway, and then OK. Let me see the zone itself to this domain Active Directory integrated. I want to actually see. Refresh. There has to be an actual mistake. Server 2 and refresh. There you go. Okay, that's what I thought. Now, look, if I right click, I cannot make changes. Look at this. This is a read copy, same thing. So what I'm trying to say is now I have my own DNS in that remote site in Connecticut, and that's what I'm going to be setting up in a moment, where my users there are pointing to that DNS server. So we're not done with RODC. We're done with actually working with the DNS at the moment. So we'll see you guys soon in another lecture. We're still part of section 10. All right, then, folks. We'll see you guys later. Bye. Okay, folks, welcome back. So let's go ahead and see more about the read-only domain controller. So what I'm going to be looking at is comparing the RODC and the writable domain controller. So there's going to be a comparison comparing the writable domain controller, right, which is my GC, right, and versus what? Versus the RODC, the read-only domain controller. So watch this. Let me go back to server 1 and log on. This is a writable domain controller. And let me go ahead also to my second one, which is the read-only domain controller. Give it a moment. There we go. All right. Remember, DNS is just an actual read copy. So look, if I go to tools and I open Active Directory users and computers, and I change this to point to my second server, which is the read-only domain controller, it's going to tell me that it's a read copy. That means I cannot make any changes at all, right? Everything is grayed out. Whereas if I go to my first server, which is the writable domain controller, and I go to Tools and Active Directory Users and Computers, and I go ahead and try to make a change, and I'm connected to the first one, look at this. Nothing is grayed out. So I cannot make changes on the read only, but I could make changes on the writable domain controller, which is the global catalog. We don't call it writable. We just say it's another DC. If there's a read only, I would have to actually specify that. So I want to create some users just to actually show you how I give actual permissions. So if I go ahead and create, let's say a user one, let me just give it an actual password, right? And remove the check mark from the box. And let's say user two. I could just do a copy. We're going to be covering this in more details. User two, and put the password right over here. All right. Now what I need to do is go to this group, allowed members, and I add user one. See this? And the user two. All right. They should be able to store their passwords on the read-only domain controller. Another thing that I have to do, I have to go to the domain controllers OU, double click the read only domain controller, and I have a tab. Look, if I compare these two over here, like, look, if I look at both of these, I'm going to start seeing something. So look at this. The read only has a password replication policy. The writable one does not actually have that. And you see that? So the read only has this where I could store the passwords over here. And this tells me who's actually allowed. And I already added the users in the list over here. If I click advanced over here, I could actually pre-populate the passwords manually. Accounts whose passwords are stored on the RODC, I could say user one and user two. See that? And click on yes. And now look, I stored the passwords on the read-only domain controller. So when user one and user two logs in, they are pointing to the DNS in that remote site, let's say in where? In Connecticut. Let me create that and show you how it works. So let me open sites and services. We're going to go back to sites and services later on anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and I have both of the servers right over here. So I'm going to rename this, right, to NY. And then I'm going to create another site and call it CT, Connecticut, using IP as an address, the protocol. Then OK. Then what I'm going to do is I need to move this server, watch this, and move it to Connecticut. Then OK. So Connecticut has a read-only domain controller, all right? And New York has the writable domain controller. See, I cannot replicate from Connecticut to New York, but if I double-click this, I can see it's an RODC connection from New York to Connecticut. Any changes that needs to be made has to be done in New York. This is basically a read-only domain controller. Not much to it, but it's for a remote site, as we mentioned, that you don't have a network admin on staff, and you're concerned somebody steals a DC. They can't really do much with it because they can't even log into it. That's the thing with the RODC, because it's a read copy. All right. Well, this is done with this section. We're going to go ahead and continue with a new section. So we'll see you folks in a moment. All right, everybody, later on. Bye.